I'm going to start off by reading to you an article of the Constitution that none of you have heard of. Listen closely. When the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States is denied to any citizens of the United States or in any way abridged, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in proportion which the number of such citizens shall bear to the whole number of citizens in such state. Now you don't even know what that means, do you? You're talking about proportional voting. Ladies and gentlemen, you already have it under the Constitution and you don't know it. You've been had, bamboozled, flim-flam, hoodwinked, con-snookered in snow. When you go back, you're going to shock yourself. Read Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. And you're going to say is, my God, what the hell is going on? It is so obvious that everything that is proceeding is now unconstitutional. And now I'm going to talk to you on December 22nd. You've heard about Bush versus Gore. The real suit was Gordon versus Gore. On December 22nd, I filed a suit to try to enforce Article 2 of the 14th Amendment, Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. And the reason why I sued Gore is because Gore was letting the Republican Party use an article to protect the rights of the son of a slave owner against an article that was used to protect the son of the slaves. And he was not using to protect it for the people who supported him. Gore threw the case. It was a vote. He threw it. The strongest case he had, we all know that, was what happened to the African American voters that is supporting him. He said that if winning this election means that I have to protect those who gave me the most support, I would not do it because it would embarrass my race that engaged, the party that engaged in racial profiling to defeat me. So I'm sorry, but Gore made a white supremacist decision. Let's be clear on that. In the ballot test, he abandoned the constitutional right of African Americans. He would not go that far. That was his limit. Let's be clear. He had his limits, and his limit was not to embarrass the system by protecting us. I'm sorry, but that's the way it was. Now let's talk about Bush versus Gore. This is, although we may never know with complete certainty the identity of the winner of this year's presidential election, the identity of the loser is perfectly clear. It is the nation's confidence in the judge as an impartial guardian of the rule of law. Damn, I wish I had said that. Those words were spoken by Lincoln's colleague, Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, in his dissent. He ought to be shaming himself. He ought to be embarrassed that one of his fellow jurists would say that he has so lowered the court that he has we lose the confidence in it being an impartial guardian of the law. If Paul Stevens has said that in any court, to any judge, he would be held in contempt of court. So he made a statement that was in contempt of the Supreme Court from the bench of the Supreme Court. Practical in the portrayal of the Negro, from Rufus B. Hayes to Woodrow Wilson, Rayford W. Logan said practically all relevant decisions of the United States Supreme Court during the Reconstruction and to the end of the century nullify or curtail rights of Negroes, which many of the Reconstruction radicals thought they had written into laws and into the Constitution. Some of these decisions are still accepted today. Just how frightening that is. The extent of such acceptance was shockingly demonstrated in Bush versus Gore. Do you understand that Bush versus Gore, like I say, used a pre-Civil War article that has been usurped by the 14th Amendment passed after Civil War? I want you to know you have a Supreme Court that is interpreting the Constitution as if the Confederate States of America won the Civil War. I'm telling you, that's how outrageous this is. And if you think this guy is going overboard, the case that he cited in order to support Bush, Bush over Gore, was McPherson versus Bracken. You know when that case was decided? 1892. Now let me tell you something about this case. At the time, after Reconstruction, the former Confederate States were engaged in the veterans of the Confederate States were engaged in lynching and outright assassination of the former slaves who were trying to exercise the right to vote. The radical Republicans at that time, the radical whites at that time, a time when they had some serious white folks, they passed what they called the Force Bill. And the Force Bill was to put the operation of the election under the federal machinery. McPherson versus Bracken was a home rule ruling to give that protection back to the states against the effort of the federal government to try to protect the rights of the former slaves. Ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court used a white redemptionist ruling that was used to redeem the South back to white rule in this present election today, and it had the same effect of defranchising the African American aspirations today. And it said the individual citizen has no federal constitutional right to vote for electors for the President of the United States in McPherson versus Bracken, 1892. We explained that in Article 2, and I just read from you from the 14th Amendment, when the right to vote in election for the choice of electors for the President and Vice President is denied to any citizen of the United States. Direct vote for the electors to the President that you want, that means direct proportional representation. When was that passed? July 1868. Everything that's going on, gentlemen, is in violation of the Constitution that exists after the Civil War. We are prosecuting everything as if the Civil War was won by the Confederates. That's how they are interpreted. Now, you may ask, only 4 years after they passed McPherson versus Bracken, that the Supreme Court relied on, they decided a case in 1896. Guess what that case was? Plessy versus Ferguson, which established racial apartheid, that put the Supreme Court stamp on a racial apartheid. So here is a case court that is being used to govern our elections today. The same court that set the precedent for racial apartheid. And there's no outrage, there's no debate in any of the legal forms over the outrageousness of this act. And when Lawrence, the white liberal constitutional lawyer from Harvard, was asked about Bracken, he acted like he didn't know what it was. And Rehnquist just played with him. Go back and look at the transcript. You know why? Because Lawrence Tribe, that liberal white constitutional lawyer, would have had to say, Mr. Justice, are we to govern our election today predicated on a case that was to protect the former Confederate states who were engaged in lynching, hanging, and assassination against policies that were trying to protect the former slaves to vote, and use that as our presidents and guiding us today. He couldn't embarrass him like that. He couldn't shame that court like that. And so he kept his mouth shut. Now, again, about what our hero, Albert Gore, knows that he won the popular vote. He knows he won the popular vote. But let's break it down and let's be honest about it. He only won the popular vote if you count the African American vote on top of the white vote. He lost the white vote. He did not win the popular white vote. He only won the popular vote if you add in the African American vote. He also knows that the election was stolen. He knows that the president of the United States was not elected by the whole people, but was selected by the Supreme Court. But what was the price? To demonstrate those known facts, he would have to expose the electoral racial profiling used by those who opposed him in Florida. Let's be clear. He chose to give up a presidency he knows he won, but could only be determined with certainty if he aggressively asserted the rights of the blacks who supported him, to the embarrassment of exposing the electoral racial profiling and taxes of a political system that opposed him. He chose to protect his own race, express majority opinion over the constitutional rights of his African American supporters. The Bush-Gore electoral election now joins the Hayes-Tilden electoral crisis. In 1876, there was a close vote. And part of it had to do with Florida. And at that time, the Republican Party, which was the party that protected African American interests, in order to have peace over the close election, they too sacrificed the protection of African Americans. And they said, if you, even though you lost I won the popular vote, you can have the electoral votes to win if you agree to pull the troops out of the Confederate States and let us resegregate those blacks and take away their rights. That was the compromise. But guess what? Bush versus Gore was compromise and redemption too. And Gore did the same thing. Let's be clear. He said, I will not tear us apart. There is a limit. When you ask him, Bush, keep on fighting, how far will you go? There was a limit. The limit was us. He was not willing to go to fight, the full fight for his rights if it meant embarrassing his own people. Now, that's why I sued Gore. When I was before the judge, I want you to understand, that was a case, the media didn't cover it, they didn't want you to know about it. Do you realize that on the eve that they were going to count, in the district court down there, that a judge was hearing me about stopping the count on January the 6th? I was joined in this suit by my colleague, Morris Douglas Jameson. Judge Lambert was hearing the suit. And the justice was sweating because in a few hours, this case may have stopped the voting count from voting. And so they said, why does he come at this late date? It's so late, and try to bring up this issue when we in the counting process. I said, Your Honor, the reason why I'm here on this late date, I didn't know my man Gore was going to give it up. I thought he was going to continue to fight for his rights. And you know what Lambert say? On the issue of him bringing it so late, that's out because he's right. He had no way to know that Gore was going to abandon and not continue to fight right. Let's understand, after the Supreme Court decision of Bush versus Gore, it wasn't over. Gore could have gone back, right? It was remanded, right, to the court. But the problem was, he didn't want to go back in the future being known that Yeah, he won the election, and let's make it clear. If he had done it, and he's going to front that he had won it, he wouldn't have won the next election. You know why? They would say the Democratic Party is the party that won the election by overturning the majority vote of what the whites voted and counted in a few blacks, and that made the majority. That's what the Democrats are about. Let me make it clear. They understood that. They were in a balancing test, a delicate situation, and they choose to sacrifice us and not protect the Constitution. The reason why I brought this is because it's in the memory, and I said this during my presentation before the judge, it's in the memory of over those thousands, hundreds of, tens of thousands African Americans and whites who died in the Civil War, to actually expand the franchise that had been limited before the Civil War and include all of us. That's whose memory it is in. I have filed this suit because everything that is taking place is a mockery and an insult and a degradation to those whites and blacks who fought to span in the electoral college and have us all participate in the vote. And with one last thing, I will leave you. For those of you that think that this is why, it will never happen. They will never reduce representatives predicated on the proportion of that population that have been denied the franchise. I just want to leave you with this. It was actually done. It has been done. This is from January 19, 1867. The House has introduced a bill to provide for restoring the states lately in surrender of to their full political rights. This person is really upset that they're about to pass this bill, and here's his reason. This is from January 19, 1867. There is a provision, one minute, in this third bill, which says that if the right of suffrage and any other rights in any way restricted is denied in any of these states to the Negro, then that state shall be excluded from its representation upon the floor of Congress. And those white abolitionists actually did. They actually denied their own white brothers the right to vote, gave it to a black. If you were black, and you can make an X. If you're white, I don't care. If you voted for the Confederacy, and you can make white soliloquies, and you cannot vote. And the reason why you have a 13, 14, 15th Amendment today is because they took the franchise away from your ancestors, gave it to my ancestors, and that's why Bush could sue under that article for the son of a slave owner, and Gore would not protect the son of the slaves for which it was intended. Thank you.
A.C. Gordon, what a speech, what a speech. Anyway.